Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his weathered hands with a rag that had seen better decades. The scrapyard of ghosts stretched endlessly in all directions, a twisted maze of dead star ships and forgotten dreams. Somewhere in the distance, the hulk of a vegan battlecruiser cast long shadows across the debris field, its broken hull serving as a reminder that even the mightiest vessels eventually found their way here. The human mechanic had been working on the same salvage job for 3 weeks now, carefully extracting usable components from a crashed merchant vessel. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid enough to keep his small repair ship, the Rusty Wrench, fueled and stocked with basic supplies. More importantly, it kept him moving through the galaxy's most lawless region without drawing unwanted attention from the various criminal organizations that used the scrapyard as their base of operations. Marcus had learned long ago that being unremarkable was the key to survival out here. Humans weren't particularly feared or respected in this part of space. Most alien species viewed them as stubborn, primitive creatures who refused to embrace proper technology. While other civilizations had moved on to molecular assemblers and quantum fabricators, humans still insisted on fixing things with actual tools, preferring to understand how something worked rather than simply replacing it with a newer model. This reputation for being backward had its advantages. Pirates and raiders rarely bothered with human ships, assuming they contained nothing of value. Corporate fleets ignored them entirely, considering human technology too inferior to war and inspection. Even the Galactic Council treated humanity as a minor curiosity, barely worthy of a seat at the diplomatic table. Marcus didn't mind the dismissive attitudes. He'd spent the last 15 years wandering the Outer Rim, taking repair jobs that other mechanics wouldn't touch. His reputation for being able to fix anything, regardless of its origin or condition, had spread quietly through certain circles. When someone needed their ship repaired quickly and discreetly, they sought out Marcus Chun. The work suited him perfectly. He'd always been more comfortable with machines than people, finding solace in the logical patterns of mechanical systems. Every bolt, every wire, every circuit had a purpose and a place. Unlike people, machines didn't betray you or abandon you when times got tough. They simply did what they were designed to do, as long as you treated them with respect and understanding. As Marcus worked to extract a particularly stubborn power coupling, his proximity sensors began chirping softly. Something large was approaching through the debris field. He paused, listening carefully to the pattern of beeps. Whatever was coming wasn't following a normal flight path. Instead of the steady, purposeful movement of a ship under control, the sensors detected an erratic, tumbling trajectory. Marcus set down his tools and made his way to the Rusty Wrench's small observation deck. Through the reinforced viewport, he could see something massive moving between the wrecked ships. At first, he thought it might be another derelict vessel, knocked loose from its resting place by gravitational shifts. But as it drew closer, Marcus realized he was looking at something far more dangerous. The creature was easily the size of a small frigate, its serpentine body undulating through space with surprising grace despite its obvious injuries. Metallic scales caught the dim starlight, creating patterns of silver and deep blue across its hide. Tattered wing membranes stretched between elongated limbs, torn and blackened by what appeared to be weapons fire. Most striking of all were the creature's eyes, massive orbs that glowed with an inner fire, intelligence burning within their depths. Marcus had never seen a dragon in person, but he'd heard enough stories to recognize one of the Zephyrian Empire's bioweapons. These creatures were legendary throughout the galaxy, engineered specifically for destruction and conquest. A single dragon could reduce a small moon to molten slag, their plasma breath hot enough to melt through the heaviest armor plating. They were intelligent, ruthless, and absolutely loyal to their Zephyrian masters. Except this one appeared to be alone. The dragon's flight became increasingly erratic as Marcus watched. Green fluid leaked from numerous wounds along its flanks, freezing instantly in a vacuum of space and creating a glittering trail of crystallized blood. Whatever had attacked this creature had done significant damage. As Marcus continued to observe, the dragon's movements became more labored, its massive form beginning to drift rather than fly. Common sense told Marcus to power down his ship and wait for the creature to pass. Dragons were apex predators, capable of destroying entire fleets when healthy. Even wounded, one could easily tear apart a small repair vessel and its lone occupant. The smart thing to do would be to avoid any contact whatsoever. But Marcus had never been particularly good at following common sense. The dragon was dying. That much was obvious from its deteriorating flight pattern and the increasing amount of bodily fluids trailing behind it. Whatever conflict had brought it to the scrapyard, the creature had clearly come here to die in peace, far from the eyes of its enemies. Marcus found himself thinking about his own journey to this place. Like many humans who ended up in the Outer Rim, he'd come here running from something. In his case, it had been the collapse of his marriage and the subsequent loss of his repair business on New Terra. His ex-wife had made it clear that his obsession with work, his preference for machines over people, had destroyed their relationship. She'd taken half of everything he'd worked for and married a successful corporate executive within 6 months. The failure had driven Marcus to the edge of human space, where broken things and broken people came to start over or quietly fade away. He'd found a kind of peace in the scrapyard, surrounded by the remnants of dead civilizations. Here, among the wreckage, his skills mattered more than his social shortcomings. As he watched the wounded dragon struggle through the debris field, Marcus recognized a kindred spirit. Like him, the creature had come to this place seeking solitude. Like him, it was far from home and probably had nowhere else to go. The dragon's flight pattern suddenly changed, its massive head turning in the direction of the rusty wrench. For a moment, Marcus thought the creature might attack, but instead, it began to alter course. Slowly, carefully, the dragon maneuvered itself toward a relatively clear area of space near Marcus's position. Marcus watched in fascination as the creature positioned itself among several large pieces of debris, using them as anchor points. With surprising delicacy for something so massive, the dragon arranged itself in what appeared to be a resting position, its injured wings folded against its body. The message was unmistakable. The creature wasn't looking for a fight. It simply wanted to die quietly, and it had chosen to do so near the only other living being in this section of the scrapyard. Marcus stood at his viewport for a long time, studying the wounded dragon. He could see the slow rise and fall of its breathing, the occasional flutter of damaged wing membranes. The creature's eyes remained open, alert despite its obvious pain. It was aware of Marcus's presence, but made no aggressive moves. An idea began to form in Marcus's mind. It was probably stupid, almost certainly dangerous, and definitely against every survival instinct he developed over years in the Outer Rim. But as he looked at the dying creature, he found himself thinking about all the broken things he'd encountered in his career. Ships that other mechanics had written off as total losses, systems that were supposedly beyond repair. He'd brought many of them back from the brink, simply because he'd been willing to try when others wouldn't. Marcus had always believed that everything could be fixed if you understood how it worked and were willing to put in the effort. The question was whether that philosophy extended to dying dragons. He spent the next several hours researching everything he could find about Zephyrian bioweapons. Most of the information was classified or heavily censored, but Marcus had access to certain black market databases that contained detailed technical specifications. What he found was both fascinating and terrifying. Dragons weren't simply large animals that had been trained for warfare. They were sophisticated biomechanical constructs, combining organic tissue with advanced technology. Their scales contained microcircuitry that regulated body temperature and provided protection against energy weapons. Their internal organs were supplemented with artificial systems that enhanced their natural abilities. Even their plasma breath was generated by a combination of biological processes and technological components. In essence, dragons were living machines. Complex, dangerous, and incredibly advanced machines, but machines nonetheless. And Marcus Chun had built his reputation on being able to fix any machine, no matter how exotic or challenging. The more he read, the more convinced he became that the dragon's wounds might be reparable. The creature appeared to be suffering from a combination of physical trauma and system failures. Its biomechanical components were probably damaged, leading to cascading problems throughout its hybrid physiology. Marcus began gathering supplies, selecting tools and materials that might be useful for biological repairs. He had a small medical kit aboard the rusty wrench, along with various synthetic compounds that could serve as temporary patches or sealants. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As he prepared for what was likely the most dangerous house call of his career, Marcus found himself wondering about the dragon's story. How had it ended up here, wounded and alone? What had driven one of the Zephyrian Empire's ultimate weapons to seek refuge in a graveyard of ships? The questions would have to wait. Right now, there was a dying creature outside his ship, and Marcus Chun had work to do. He sealed his environmental suit, gathered his tools, and headed for the airlock. The dragon watched him approach through the vacuum of space, its glowing eyes tracking his every movement. Marcus moved slowly, keeping his hands visible and his body language as non-threatening as possible. When he reached the creature's massive head, he stopped and waited. For several long moments, human and dragon studied each other. Marcus could see intelligence in those alien eyes, a keen awareness that was both fascinating and terrifying. The creature was clearly evaluating him, trying to determine whether he represented a threat or an opportunity. Finally, Marcus activated his suit's external speakers and spoke the words that would change both their lives forever. "I'm here to help." The dragon's eyes narrowed slightly, and Marcus could have sworn he saw surprise flicker across the creature's alien features. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in Marcus's mind through some form of telepathic communication. Why would a human help one of the Empire's weapons? The question hung in the space between them, loaded with implications that Marcus didn't fully understand. But his answer came without hesitation, born from years of experience with broken things and broken lives. Because everyone deserves a chance to be fixed. The dragon continued to study him for what felt like an eternity. Finally, it shifted slightly, exposing one of its more serious wounds. "I am dying, human. My biosystems are failing. Even if you possess the skill to repair the damage, why would you risk your life for a creature you do not know?" Marcus looked at the exposed wound, already beginning to analyze the complex interaction of organic tissue and technological components. It was unlike anything he'd ever worked on, but the underlying principles seemed familiar. Because, he said, unpacking his tools, nobody should have to die alone. As Marcus began his examination of the dragon's injuries, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was going to change everything. The creature watching him was far more than a simple bioweapon. There was a depth to its intelligence, a complexity to its personality that suggested capabilities beyond destruction. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't alone either. The dragon's wounds were worse than Marcus had initially realized. What he'd taken for simple plasma burns were actually complex system failures affecting both organic and mechanical components. The creature's biointegrated armor had been breached in dozens of places, causing critical fluids to leak into space while preventing proper healing responses from engaging. Working in zero gravity while wearing an environmental suit made the repairs incredibly challenging. Marcus had to anchor himself carefully to avoid floating away while maintaining steady pressure on delicate components. The dragon remained perfectly still during the process, though Marcus could sense its watchful attention on every move he made. "What designation do you carry?" the dragon asked during a particularly difficult procedure to seal a punctured biomechanical organ. Marcus paused in his work, surprised by the question. "Designation? Your identification within the human military hierarchy. Your rank and specialization." "I'm not military," Marcus replied, returning his attention to the complex array of tubing and circuitry he was trying to repair. "I'm just a mechanic." An independent contractor. The dragon's mental voice carried a note of confusion. You possess extensive knowledge of biomechanical systems. Your repair techniques demonstrate advanced training in xenobiology and quantum engineering. Yet you claim no military affiliation. Marcus almost smiled at that. If only his ex-wife could hear an alien superweapon praising his technical abilities. I'm self-taught. I've been fixing things for most of my life. You learn a lot when you're willing to take on jobs that other people won't touch. Self-taught, the dragon repeated as if testing the concept. This is unusual. Maybe in your culture, Marcus said, carefully aligning a damaged neural interface. But humans have always been good at figuring things out on their own. We don't usually wait for formal instruction when something needs fixing. The dragon remained silent for a long time while Marcus worked. The human had already stabilized 3 critical systems and was making progress on a 4th. His techniques were unconventional, combining elements from multiple technological traditions in ways that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. What do you call yourself? Marcus asked as he began work on a damaged wing membrane. The tissue was unlike anything in his experience, but the underlying structure reminded him of advanced composite materials he'd worked with before. I am designation Zerathis 9, primary combat unit of the 3rd Stellar Fleet. That's quite a mouthful, Marcus said. Mind if I just call you Zerathis? The dragon's surprise was palpable. You wish to use my personal identifier? Marcus looked up from his work. You have a personal name separate from your designation? All dragons possess both designations and names. Our names are private, sacred. They are not shared with outsiders. Understand, Marcus said quickly. I didn't mean to offend. Zerathis 9 it is. No, the dragon said quietly. You may call me Zerathis. You have earned the right through your actions. Marcus felt an unexpected warmth at the simple gesture. Thank you. I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Chun. Marcus Chun, Zerathis repeated, rolling the human name through his thoughts. Tell me, Marcus Chun, why do you dwell in this place of death? Humans typically cluster together in their colonies and settlements. The question hit closer to home than Marcus expected. He continued working while he considered his answer, using the complex repair procedure as an excuse to delay. I suppose I'm hiding, he finally admitted. I used to have a life back in civilized space. A business, a wife, a nice little world where everything made sense. But I wasn't very good at being around people. I cared more about my work than my relationships, and eventually everything fell apart. You were exiled for your failures. Not exiled exactly. I left. My wife took half of everything when she divorced me, and I couldn't afford to keep my shop running. So I packed what I could carry and headed for the rim. Been out here ever since. Zerathis processed this information while Marcus sealed another damaged bioconduit. The dragon found the human's honesty refreshing. In the Zephyrian Empire, personal failures were weaknesses to be concealed or eliminated. The idea of voluntarily admitting to such things was foreign to his experience. Do you regret this choice? Marcus paused to consider the question. Sometimes. I miss having a real workshop, proper tools, a steady supply of parts. But I don't miss the politics, the backstabbing, the constant pressure to compromise my work for the sake of profit. Out here, I can fix things the right way, even if it takes longer or costs more. You value integrity over success. I guess that's one way to put it. Zerathis found himself intrigued by this strange human. In the Empire, dragons were created for specific purposes and evaluated solely on their effectiveness in fulfilling those roles. The concept of choosing principles over advancement was completely alien to his worldview. As Marcus worked deeper into the dragon's biomechanical systems, he began to understand just how sophisticated these creatures really were. Every component was perfectly integrated with every other component, creating a seamless blend of biology and technology. It was like working on a living starship, one that could think and feel and make decisions. How were you created? Marcus asked as he carefully recalibrated a damaged sensory array. I was grown in the Imperial biofoundries on Zephyr Prime, Zerathis replied. My base genetic structure was derived from an ancient predatory species, enhanced with technological components and modified for optimal combat performance. The process took approximately 40 standard years. 40 years? That's almost twice my entire lifespan. Dragons are designed for longevity. I am currently 123 years old, which is considered young for my species. My expected operational lifespan is approximately 1,000 years, assuming standard maintenance protocols are followed. Marcus whistled softly. That's incredible. You're like a living piece of history. History is what I'm fleeing from, Zarathis said darkly. The comment made Marcus look up from his work. What do you mean? Zarathis was quiet for so long that Marcus thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his mental voice carried undertones of pain that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. The Empire created us to be perfect weapons. We were programmed with absolute loyalty, trained to follow orders without question, designed to feel satisfaction only when destroying our enemies. For over a century, I fulfilled this role without hesitation. I burned worlds, eliminated populations, reduced entire civilizations to ash. Marcus continued his repairs, sensing that the dragon needed to tell this story. 3 months ago, I was assigned to pacify a colony world that had refused to pay tribute to the Empire. The settlement was small, perhaps 50,000 inhabitants. They had no military capabilities, no defenses that could threaten an Imperial fleet. My orders were to eliminate all resistance and prepare the world for Imperial occupation. Zarathis paused, his great eyes focusing on something far beyond the scrapyard's twisted metal. When I arrived in the system, I found that the colonists had already evacuated most of their population. Only a few thousand remained, primarily elderly individuals and those too sick to travel. They offered no resistance. They simply waited for death to come. Marcus had stopped working, completely absorbed in the dragon's story. I descended to the primary settlement to complete my mission, but as I prepared to unleash my plasma breath, I observed something that changed everything. An elderly female was standing in front of a group of younglings, shielding them with her own body. She was terrified, but she refused to abandon those under her protection. What did you do? I hesitated. For the first time in my existence, I questioned my orders. Why should these helpless beings die? What threat did they pose to the Empire? I found myself unable to complete the mission. Marcus understood now why Zarathis had ended up wounded and alone. You refused to kill them. I attempted to return to my command ship and request clarification of my orders. The fleet commander declared me defective and ordered my immediate termination. I was forced to fight my way out of the system, sustaining significant damage in the process. So now you're a deserter. I am a failed weapon, Zarathis corrected. A defective tool that must be discarded before it can contaminate other units. The Empire will not stop hunting me until I am destroyed. Marcus looked at the massive creature he'd been working to save. A dragon was probably the most dangerous thing in the known galaxy, capable of single-handedly destroying entire fleets. Yet here was one that had thrown away everything because it couldn't bring itself to harm innocent people. You did the right thing, Marcus said firmly. Did I? I betrayed my creators, abandoned my purpose, condemned myself to exile and death. In what way can this be considered right? Because those people are alive because of your choice. Their families, their children, their entire future exists because you decided that innocent lives mattered more than following orders. Zarathis considered this perspective while Marcus resumed his repairs. The dragon had never thought of his actions in terms of what he had preserved rather than what he had lost. The Empire considers such thinking a fundamental flaw in my programming. Maybe, Marcus said, but I think it means your programming worked better than they intended. They tried to create a weapon, but they accidentally created a person. The concept struck Zarathis with unexpected force. A person, not a weapon, not a tool, not a defective unit to be discarded. A thinking, feeling individual capable of making moral choices. Is this what you believe? I believe that anyone capable of choosing mercy over violence, regardless of the cost to themselves, has earned the right to be called a person, Marcus said. "What you did took incredible courage. Most people never face a choice that defines who they really are." Marcus finished the last of the critical repairs as he spoke. Zarathus's biosystems were stable now, though full healing would take time. The dragon experimentally flexed his wings, surprised to feel strength returning to damaged muscles and membranes. "You have saved my life, Marcus-chun. I am in your debt." "No debt necessary," Marcus replied, packing up his tools. "Just glad I could help." As they talked, Marcus realized that despite the alien nature of his new companion, he felt more connected to another being than he had in years. Zarathus was intelligent, thoughtful, and surprisingly easy to talk to. More importantly, they seemed to understand each other in ways that transcended their different species. "What will you do now?" Zarathus asked as Marcus prepared to return to his ship. "I suppose I'll continue what I was doing before. Salvage work, repair jobs, trying to stay under the radar. And I will continue running until the Empire's hunters find me." They both fell silent, contemplating their respective futures. Neither had much to look forward to beyond survival, and even that was uncertain. "You know," Marcus said slowly, "I've got room on my ship for a passenger, if you're interested in staying together for a while." Zarathus's surprise was obvious. "You would willingly travel with a fugitive dragon? The Empire will show no mercy to those who aid me." "Maybe, but I've been alone out here for a long time, and I have to admit it's been nice having someone to talk to. Besides, the galaxy's a dangerous place. I could use someone watching my back. And what would I contribute to such an arrangement? I have no money, no resources, no skills beyond destruction." Marcus grinned. "Actually, there's one thing you could help with. I'm terrible at cooking, and I haven't had a decent meal in months. You wouldn't happen to know anything about food preparation, would you?" The question seemed to surprise Zarathus. Yes, actually. Dragons require a varied diet to maintain optimal health. I have extensive knowledge of nutrition and food preparation techniques." "Perfect," Marcus said. "A partnership it is then. You handle the cooking, I'll handle the repairs, and we'll watch each other's backs." Zarathus found himself agreeing before he fully understood why. The arrangement made no logical sense. Traveling with a human mechanic offered no strategic advantages and considerable risks. It's something about Marcus Chin's simple, honest offer appealed to him in ways he couldn't quite explain. "Very well, Marcus Chun. I accept your proposal." As Marcus headed back to his ship to prepare for their new partnership, Zarathus reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. A few hours ago, he had been a dying fugitive with no hope for the future. Now he had found not just healing, but something far more valuable, a friend. The dragon carefully maneuvered himself closer to the rusty wrench, already planning the modifications that would be necessary to accommodate his presence. For the first time since his desertion, Zarathus found himself looking forward to the future instead of simply dreading it. 3 weeks into their unlikely partnership, Marcus discovered that Zarathus possessed an almost supernatural ability to prepare meals from the most unpromising ingredients. The dragon had somehow transformed a handful of emergency rations, some salvage vegetables, and what Marcus was fairly certain were engine coolant additives into something that actually resembled real food. "How exactly did you learn to cook like this?" Marcus asked, savoring what Zarathus called a nutritionally optimized protein synthesis, but tasted remarkably like his grandmother's pot roast. "Dragons require precise nutritional balance to maintain our biomechanical systems," Zarathus explained, his mental voice carrying notes of concentration as he carefully monitored several different cooking processes simultaneously. Imperial biofoundries provided standardized nutrition cubes that met our basic requirements, but long-term deployment missions necessitated the ability to prepare sustenance from available resources. Marcus watched in fascination as Zarathus used his precisely controlled plasma breath to heat different sections of their makeshift kitchen at exact temperatures. What had initially seemed like overkill for simple food preparation had quickly proven to be incredibly useful. The dragon could maintain multiple cooking temperatures simultaneously, flash freeze ingredients for preservation, and even sterilized questionable salvage food supplies. So the Empire trained you to cook? Not directly. I observed the meal preparation techniques of conquered species and adapted their methods for my own use. Over the decades, I accumulated knowledge from hundreds of different culinary traditions. Hundreds? Just how many worlds did you? Marcus let the question trail off as he realized what he was asking. 47 inhabited worlds, Zarathus replied quietly, each with its own unique culture, cuisine, and approach to sustaining life. I learned from all of them before I destroyed them. The mood in their small living space shifted immediately. Marcus had grown comfortable with his unusual companion over the past few weeks, almost forgetting the dragon's violent history. Zarathus rarely spoke about his past, and Marcus had been content to let sleeping dragons lie, so to speak. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I didn't mean to bring up painful memories." "The memories are not painful in the way you might expect," Zarathus said, continuing his meal preparation without pause. "Dragons are created without the capacity for guilt or remorse regarding our military actions. What disturbs me is not what I did, but how little it affected me at the time." Marcus considered this as he made adjustments to the Rusty Wrench's environmental systems. They'd had to make significant modifications to accommodate Zarathus, including expanding the cargo hold and installing specialized atmospheric processors. The Dragon couldn't actually fit inside the ship in any traditional sense, but Marcus had rigged a system of airlocks and force field that allowed them to share living space during travel. "You feel differently now?" "Everything feels different now. It is as if I have awakened from a long dream to find myself in an alien world. I remember my past actions, but they seem to belong to someone else. Someone I no longer understand." Marcus had noticed the change in his companion over their weeks together. Initially, Zarathus had been formal, almost military in his communication style. But as time passed, the dragon had become more conversational, more curious about the universe beyond warfare and destruction. "Maybe that's what happens when you start making your own choices," Marcus suggested, "instead of following someone else's programming." "Perhaps. Though I find myself questioning everything I once believed to be absolute truth. The Empire taught that efficiency and order were the highest virtues, that mercy was weakness, that individual desires were irrelevant compared to collective goals. But watching you work, observing how you approach problems and relationships, I see alternative ways of existing that were never presented as possibilities." Marcus looked up from his technical readouts. "Such as, you repair broken things not because you are ordered to do so, but because you find satisfaction in the act itself. You help me not because it served any strategic purpose, but simply because you believe it was the right thing to do. These concepts of personal fulfillment and moral choice were absent from my conditioning." "Welcome to being human," Marcus said with a smile. "We're all just making it up as we go along." Their conversation was interrupted by the proximity alarms. Marcus quickly moved to the control console, while Zarathus extended his senses outward, scanning for potential threats. 3 ships, Zarathus reported. Zephyrian hunter-killers, modified for long-range pursuit. "They have found me." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He'd known this moment would come eventually, but he'd hoped they'd have more time to prepare. Through the viewports, he could see the sleek, predatory shapes of Imperial warships emerging from behind a cluster of derelict freighters. "Can we run?" "The Rusty Wrench is not designed for high-speed maneuvering. They will overtake us within minutes." Marcus's mind raced through their options. The scrapyard of ghosts offered numerous hiding places among the wrecked ships, but the Imperial forces would have advanced sensors capable of tracking them through most conventional concealment. Fighting was out of the question. 3 military vessels against 1 unarmed repair ship would be massacre. "There's another option," Zarathus said quietly. "I'm listening. You could surrender me to them. Present yourself as a salvage operator who discovered a damaged dragon and attempted to claim the bounty. They would likely reward you and allow you to continue your activities here." Marcus stared at his companion in disbelief. "Are you insane? I'm not handing you over to people who want to kill you." It would be the logical choice. You have no stake in my conflict with the Empire. Protecting me serves no purpose beyond sentiment. Maybe sentiment is enough, Marcus said, already plotting a course deeper into the scrapyard. Besides, I've never been particularly good at making logical choices. The Imperial ships were closing rapidly, their weapons systems powering up for what would likely be a swift and decisive engagement. Marcus pushed the rusty wrench to its maximum speed, weaving between debris fields and derelict hulks in an attempt to break up their pursuers' targeting solutions. Marcus, you cannot outrun them in this vessel. I'm not trying to outrun them, Marcus replied, adjusting their trajectory toward a particularly dense cluster of wrecked capital ships. I'm trying to outwit them. The plan forming in Marcus's mind was ambitious, dangerous, and probably suicidal. But it was also the kind of unconventional thinking that had served him well throughout his career. While other mechanics followed standard procedures, Marcus had always been willing to try approaches that seemed impossible on paper, but might just work in practice. Do you trust me? Marcus asked as he guided them toward the massive hull of a destroyed battleship. Completely, Zarathus replied without hesitation. The simple, immediate response surprised them both. Trust was not something that came easily to either of them. Yet somehow, over the past weeks, they had developed absolute faith in each other's abilities and intentions. Marcus brought the rusty wrench to a relative stop inside the shadow of the derelict battleship, using its bulk to temporarily block their pursuer sensors. He had perhaps 30 seconds before the Imperial ships adjusted their positions to reacquire them. I need you to do something that's going to seem completely insane, Marcus said, rapidly configuring the ship systems for his desperate plan. I'm listening. I'm going to vent our atmosphere and open all the airlocks. When I give the signal, I need you to separate from the ship and hide inside that battleship's wreckage. Make yourself as small as possible and don't use any active systems they might detect. And what of you? I'm going to use the ship's emergency thrusters to simulate catastrophic decompression. With any luck, they'll think we've been destroyed in an accident. Zarathus immediately saw the flaws in the plan. The Imperial sensors will detect your life signs. Even if they believe the ship has been destroyed, they will investigate to recover any survivors. Not if I'm in suspended animation, Marcus said, pulling out an emergency stasis pod from the medical bay. These things are designed to keep someone alive for up to 72 hours with minimal life signs. The pods are heavily shielded and should read as just another piece of debris. The risk is enormous. If the stasis system fails, you will die. If they detect the deception, we will both be captured. Do you have a better idea? Zarathus considered their options for several precious seconds. No, your plan, while deeply flawed, offers the highest probability of success given our current circumstances. Glad you approve, Marcus said, beginning the shutdown sequence for the ship's life support systems. Get ready to move on my signal. The next few minutes passed in a blur of frantic activity. Marcus sealed himself into the stasis pod, while Zarathus positioned himself near the airlock. As the Imperial ships closed in on their position, Marcus triggered the emergency systems, venting the rusty wrench's atmosphere in a convincing simulation of catastrophic hull failure. Zarathus launched himself from the ship at the precise moment the decompression began, using the explosive force to mask his own movement as he disappeared into the labyrinthine interior of the destroyed battleship. The rusty wrench tumbled through space, spinning end over end as if completely out of control. From his hiding place deep within the battleship's wreckage, Zarathus watched as the Imperial hunter-killers approached the apparently destroyed repair ship. He could sense their scanning beams sweeping across the debris, searching for signs of life or hidden threats. The minutes stretched like hours as the Imperial forces conducted their investigation. Zarathus remained absolutely motionless, using meditation techniques learned during his military training to minimize his biological functions. Every instinct screamed at him to flee or fight, but he forced himself to remain hidden. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Imperial ships withdrew. Their sensors had detected no signs of life, no evidence that their target had ever been in the area. As far as they were concerned, the dragon they had been hunting remained at large somewhere else in the galaxy. Zarathus waited another hour before carefully emerging from his hiding place. The rusty wrench drifted silently among the debris, showing no signs of life or activity. Using his own small maneuvering thrusters, Zarathus approached the ship and began the delicate process of reactivating its systems. Marcus emerged from stasis 3 hours later, groggy but alive. His first coherent words were a question about Zarathus's condition, which the dragon found strangely touching. "I am undamaged," Zarathus reported as Marcus slowly regained full consciousness. "Your plan succeeded. The Imperial forces have withdrawn from this sector." "Good," Marcus mumbled, still fighting off the effects of suspended animation. "I was starting to worry we might have to try something really crazy." Zarathus found himself amused by the human's perspective. By any reasonable standard, what they had just attempted qualified as extremely crazy. Yet Marcus seemed to consider it merely another problem to be solved with creative engineering. As they worked together to restore the ship's systems, Zarathus reflected on what had just happened. Marcus had risked his life to protect someone he had known for only a few weeks. More than that, he had trusted Zarathus completely, placing his survival in the hands of a creature he had every reason to fear. "Why did you do it?" Zarathus asked as they completed the system checks. "Do what?" "Risk your life for me. You could have surrendered me to the Imperial forces and continued your existence here in safety." Marcus paused in his work, considering the question seriously. "I guess because that's not the kind of person I want to be. I've spent most of my life running away from problems, avoiding difficult choices, taking the easy path. Maybe it's time I started standing up for something that matters." "And I matter to you?" "You're my friend," Marcus said simply. "Of course you matter." The word friend resonated through Zarathus's consciousness like a bell. In all his years of existence, no one had ever applied that term to him. He had been a weapon, a tool, a resource to be deployed. But never a friend. "I have never had a friend before," Zarathus admitted. "Well, you've got one now," Marcus replied, returning to his repairs. "And friends look out for each other." As they worked side by side to repair the damage from their escape, both partners realized that their relationship had fundamentally changed. What had begun as a simple arrangement of mutual convenience had evolved into something neither of them had expected to find in the depths of space. They had found family among the stars. 2 months after their narrow escape from the Imperial hunters, Marcus and Zarathus had settled into a comfortable routine that neither had expected to enjoy as much as they did. Their reputation as an unusual but effective problem-solving team had begun to spread through the more discreet channels of the Outer Rim's underground economy. The call that would change everything came from an encrypted transmission that reached them while they were conducting routine maintenance on a damaged cargo hauler. The message was brief, coded, and carried authentication protocols that Marcus recognized from his days working near military installations. "Marcus Chun, we have a situation that requires your unique expertise," the message began. "The nature of this request necessitates absolute discretion. If you're interested in compensation that would allow you to retire permanently from salvage work, respond to the attached coordinates." Marcus stared at the message for several minutes, while Zarathus monitored his emotional state with growing concern. "What troubles you, friend?" "This message," Marcus said, forwarding the transmission to Zarathus's neural interface. "It's from someone with serious resources and serious problems. The kind of problems that usually involve people shooting at you." Zarathus analyzed the communication protocols embedded in the message. The encryption methods are consistent with Galactic Council intelligence services, specifically the type used by their Special Operations Division. "Which means what exactly?" "That someone very powerful wants to hire us for something very dangerous." Marcus leaned back in his pilot's chair, considering their options. They'd been living comfortably on the proceeds from legitimate salvage and repair work, but their resources were limited. The rusty wrench needed significant upgrades if they wanted to continue operating safely in the Outer Rim, and Zarathus's presence made it impossible to dock at most commercial stations for supplies and maintenance. "What do you think?" Marcus asked his partner. "I think that curiosity has historically proven dangerous for both humans and dragons," Zarathus replied. "However, I also think that we cannot continue hiding indefinitely. Eventually, we must engage with the wider galaxy if we wish to build a sustainable future." Marcus nodded, already making his decision. Send a reply. "Let them know we're interested, but we'll need full disclosure before committing to anything." The response came within hours, along with coordinates for a meeting location in a neutral system 3 days' travel from their current position. More intriguingly, the message included a substantial advance payment that exceeded their earnings from the past 6 months of salvage work. "Either they're desperate, or this job is going to be more dangerous than we thought," Marcus observed as he confirmed the payment transfer. "Possibly both," Zarathus agreed. Their destination turned out to be an abandoned research station orbiting a dead world at the edge of civilized space. The facility showed signs of recent occupation, but their sensors detected only a single ship docked at the station's primary port. "Interesting choice for a meeting," Marcus commented as they approached the docking facility. "Isolated, defensible, and far from any jurisdiction that might interfere with clandestine operations," Zarathus observed. Typical intelligence community thinking. The woman who met them at the airlock was not what Marcus had expected. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared to be in her 50s, with graying hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much of the galaxy's darker corners. She wore civilian clothes rather than military uniform, but her posture and bearing suggested extensive combat experience. "Mr. Chun, I presume," she said, extending a hand in greeting. Her eyes moved to Zarathus with obvious curiosity, but no apparent fear. "And you must be the famous deserter dragon I've heard so much about. You know about Zarathus?" Marcus asked, immediately on guard. "I know about a lot of things, Mr. Chun. It's my job. Please, both of you come inside. We have much to discuss and limited time to do it." The station's interior had been converted into a combination laboratory and command center. Banks of sophisticated equipment hummed quietly in the background, while holographic displays showed star charts and technical schematics that Marcus didn't recognize. "Before we begin," Dr. Vasquez said, settling into a chair across from her unusual visitors, "I should explain who I am and why I need your help. I'm the director of a classified research project funded by several galactic council member worlds. We've been investigating unusual phenomena occurring throughout the Outer Rim." She activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of their local galactic region. Red markers indicated dozens of locations scattered across hundreds of star systems. "Over the past year, we've documented systematic disappearances of entire colonies, research stations, and even small fleets. No distress signals, no signs of struggle, no wreckage. Entire populations simply vanishing without a trace." Marcus studied the display with growing unease. "How many people are we talking about?" "Conservative estimates suggest over 2 million individuals have disappeared," Dr. Vasquez replied. "The pattern is spreading, moving steadily toward more populated systems. At the current rate, we calculate it will reach the core worlds within 18 months. Zarathus extended his consciousness into the station's computer systems, analyzing the data with his enhanced processing capabilities. The disappearances follow a specific pattern. Each location was isolated, defenseless, and strategically insignificant from a military perspective. "Exactly," Dr. Vasquez confirmed, "which suggests our unknown adversary is conducting some form of systematic harvest operation." "Harvest?" Marcus asked. "We believe something is collecting sentient beings for purposes unknown. The precision of the operations suggests advanced technology and careful planning. This isn't random predation or conventional warfare." Dr. Vasquez manipulated the display to focus on a specific sector near their current location. 3 days ago, we lost contact with Research Station Omega 7. The facility was conducting xenobiology research under heavy security. A council task force investigated the site yesterday. A new hologram materialized, showing the twisted remains of what had once been a substantial space station. The wreckage appeared to have been torn apart from the inside, with massive holes blown through multiple decks. This is the first time we've found any evidence of what happened to a disappeared facility, Dr. Vasquez continued. The damage patterns suggest the station was destroyed by something incredibly powerful that was already inside the facility when the attack began. Marcus felt a chill as he studied the devastation. Whatever had done this possessed capabilities far beyond conventional weapons. "What does this have to do with us?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "We need someone to investigate the wreckage directly. The Council's regular military forces are too conspicuous, and this situation requires individuals with unique capabilities." She gestured towards Zarathus. "Your dragon friend possesses sensory equipment that might be able to detect traces our conventional instruments missed. And your reputation for solving impossible technical problems suggests you might be able to determine what kind of technology could cause this level of destruction. You want us to poke around in the wreckage of a facility that was destroyed by something powerful enough to make entire fleets disappear," Marcus summarized. "Yes, that sounds suicidal. Probably. But the alternative is waiting for whatever did this to work its way through the outer rim until it reaches systems with billions of inhabitants. The Council is prepared to offer substantial compensation for your assistance, including full pardons for any past legal complications either of you might be experiencing." Marcus looked at Zarathus, who had been silently analyzing the data throughout their conversation. "What do you think?" Marcus asked his partner. "I think Dr. Vasquez is not telling us everything she knows about this threat," Zarathus replied. "However, the evidence suggests a danger that extends far beyond our personal concerns. If we possess capabilities that might help identify this threat, we have an obligation to act." Dr. Vasquez smiled slightly. "Your dragon has excellent instincts. You're right that I haven't shared everything we know. Some of the information is classified at levels that require formal authorization before disclosure. But I can tell you that preliminary analysis of the attack patterns suggests we're dealing with technology that incorporates elements of biomechanical design." "Like dragons," Marcus said. "Possibly. Which is another reason why your unique partnership might be essential to solving this mystery." Marcus found himself thinking about all the people who had disappeared, all the families that had been torn apart by this unknown threat. It reminded him of the colonies Zarathus had been ordered to destroy, the innocent lives that hung in the balance when powerful forces decided their fate. "If we agree to this, we do it our way," Marcus said finally. "No interference, no oversight, no orders from committee members who've never been in real danger. We investigate, we report our findings, and we get paid. After that, you can deal with whatever we find however you think best." "Agreed," Dr. Vasquez said immediately. "And if we discover that the Council or any of its member governments had prior knowledge of this threat and failed to warn the affected populations, our obligations to you end immediately." "Also agreed." Marcus looked at Zarathus one more time. "Are you sure about this?" "I have spent over a century as an instrument of destruction," Zarathus replied. "Perhaps it is time I became an instrument of preservation instead." "All right," Marcus said, turning back to Dr. Vasquez. "We'll take the job. But first, we're going to need a complete technical briefing on everything you know about these disappearances. And I mean everything." Dr. Vasquez nodded, already activating new displays filled with classified data. "Very well. But I should warn you that once you see this information, there will be no backing out. What we've discovered changes everything we thought we knew about the threats facing our galaxy." As the briefing began, Marcus realized they were about to embark on something far more dangerous than any simple investigation. They were stepping into a mystery that could reshape the balance of power throughout known space. And neither of them had any idea what they might find in the darkness between the stars. But for the first time since he'd arrived in the outer rim, Marcus felt like he was working towards something larger than simple survival. Whatever was hunting in the darkness had made a mistake by leaving evidence behind. And Marcus Chun had built his reputation on fixing things that others thought were broken beyond repair. The wreckage of Research Station Omega 7 hung in space like the broken bones of some enormous creature, twisted metal and shattered ceramics drifting in slow, lazy orbits around the station's dead core. As the rusty wrench approached the debris field, Marcus felt the familiar mixture of excitement and dread that came with investigating something that had killed everyone who'd encountered it before. Sensor readings are unusual, Zarathus reported, his enhanced perception systems analyzing the wreckage with capabilities far beyond the ship's conventional instruments. The damage patterns suggest an attack from multiple directions simultaneously, but there are no energy weapon signatures or explosive residue. Marcus maneuvered their ship closer to the largest intact section of the station, noting the way the hull plating had been peeled back like the skin of an orange. Whatever had done this possessed incredible physical strength rather than advanced weaponry. It looks like something tore the station apart with its bare hands, Marcus observed. Not hands, Zarathus corrected. Claws. Very large claws, consistent with a creature approximately my size or larger. The implication hung between them like a poison cloud. If dragons or similar bioweapons were responsible for the disappearances, it meant the Zephyrian Empire had developed new capabilities far beyond what Zarathus had known during his service. They established a stable position near the station's former command section and began deploying sensor probes throughout the debris field. Marcus had modified the probes with Zarathus's help, incorporating biomechanical sensory elements that might detect organic traces conventional scanners would miss. There, Zarathus said suddenly, his attention focused on a section of the station's research levels. I'm detecting residual biosignatures in Laboratory Complex 7. The readings are strange. Strange how? The organic matter shows characteristics consistent with dragon physiology, but the patterns are wrong. Incomplete. As if someone attempted to create dragons, but failed to understand the fundamental principles involved. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Fail how? Dragons are precisely engineered biomechanical constructs. Every component is designed to work in harmony with every other component. What I'm detecting suggests crude attempts at replication, like someone tried to copy our capabilities without understanding the underlying science. They suited up and made their way through the twisted corridors of the destroyed station. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows across walls that were scored with deep claw marks. The damage was extensive, but Marcus's trained eye could read the story written in bent metal and shattered equipment. Whatever did this was looking for something specific, Marcus said as they examined a ransacked laboratory. This isn't random destruction. They were searching through the research data, probably taking everything they could carry. Zarathus extended his senses throughout the facility, mapping the attack patterns with his enhanced perception. I count at least 6 different entities, possibly more. They moved through the station systematically, eliminating all personnel before conducting their search. Any survivors? None. The attack was swift and thorough. They made their way deeper into the research complex, following the trail of destruction toward what had once been the station's primary laboratories. The corridors grew increasingly damaged as they progressed, until they were literally crawling through twisted wreckage to reach their destination. The main laboratory had been completely gutted. Banks of sophisticated equipment lay in ruins, their contents scattered across the floor like electronic snow. But in the center of the devastation, Marcus found something that made his blood run cold. Zarathus, you need to see this. The dragon squeezed through the damaged doorway and immediately focused on what had captured Marcus's attention. Embedded in the laboratory's reinforced walls were dozens of crystalline formations that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light. Those are not natural formations, Zarathus said, approaching one of the crystals with obvious caution. Marcus pulled out his portable analyzer and began scanning the nearest formation. The readings made no sense according to conventional physics. The crystals appear to be both organic and technological, existing in a state that defied easy categorization. "It's like they're alive," Marcus said, studying the data streaming across his device. "But they're also clearly artificial. Some kind of hybrid technology that I've never seen before." Zarathus extended his consciousness toward one of the crystals, attempting to interface with whatever intelligence might exist within it. The contact was immediate and overwhelming. Images flooded Zarathus's mind. Vast ships moving through deep space, creatures that looked like twisted parodies of dragons, and, most disturbing of all, massive facilities where sentient beings were being processed like raw materials. The vision lasted only seconds, but it left Zarathus reeling from the implications. "What did you see?" Marcus asked, noting his partner's obvious distress. "The entities responsible for the disappearances are not from our galaxy," Zarathus replied. "They are refugees from a dying cosmos, seeking new sources of biological material to sustain their civilization. They have been observing our local species for decades, learning our capabilities and weaknesses, and now they're harvesting us." "Yes, but there's more. They have obtained biological samples from the Zephyrian Empire and are attempting to create their own dragons. The creatures that attacked this station were their first successful attempts." Marcus felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking together in his mind. "They're building an army using our own bioweapons technology against us." "Precisely. And given their apparent capabilities, they may soon possess forces capable of conquering this entire galactic region." The two partners spent the next several hours documenting everything they could find in the destroyed station. The crystalline formations appeared to serve as some kind of communication network, allowing the invaders to coordinate their activities across vast distances. More disturbing, analysis of the biosignatures suggested the artificial dragons were powered by the life force of their victims. "We need to contact Dr. Vasquez immediately," Marcus said as they prepared to leave the station. "The council needs to know what we've found." But as they made their way back to the rusty wrench, Zarathus detected new contacts on the edge of the system. 3 ships, moving fast and heading directly for their position. "Imperial hunter-killers again?" Marcus asked. "No," Ceratus replied grimly. "These ships match the profiles from the intelligence data. Our unknown invaders have returned to clean up any evidence we might have found." The approaching vessels were unlike anything in Marcus's experience. They moved with organic fluidity, their hulls seeming to shift and change as they accelerated toward the research station. Weapon ports opened like mouths along their sides, revealing energy projectors that glowed with the same unsettling light as the crystalline formations. "Can we outrun them?" "Unlikely. However, I may have an alternative." Zarathus began powering up his own biomechanical weapons systems, something he hadn't done since his desertion from the Imperial fleet. Energy coursed through his scales as his plasma breath chambers reached optimal temperature. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking that these creatures made a critical error when they chose to copy dragon biology without understanding dragon psychology." The first alien ship opened fire as Zarathus launched himself from the rusty wrench, using his own body as a shield to protect Marcus and their ship. Plasma beams that should have been lethal to any organic creature splashed harmlessly across Zarathus's adaptive scales. What followed was unlike any space battle Marcus had ever witnessed. Zarathus moved through the vacuum with deadly grace, his massive form dancing between energy beams as he closed distance with the alien vessels. When he reached the first ship, his claws tore through its biomechanical hull like paper. The ship's death scream was audible even through the vacuum, a psychic wail that spoke of agony and surprise. Whatever intelligence controlled these vessels had not expected to encounter a genuine dragon defending its territory. The second ship attempted to retreat, but Zarathus was faster. His plasma breath, refined through decades of combat experience, punched through the vessel's defensive screens and ignited its organic components. The ship convulsed once and went dark. The third vessel managed to launch some kind of escape pod before Zarathus destroyed it, but The dragon made no attempt to pursue the fleeing survivors. Instead, he returned to the rusty wrench, where Marcus was already plotting a course back to Dr. Vasquez's coordinates. That was incredible, Marcus said as Zarathus settled back into his traveling configuration. You destroyed 3 ships single-handedly. I had advantages they did not expect, Zarathus replied. Their artificial dragons are crude copies that lack the centuries of combat experience and adaptive capabilities of genuine Imperial bioweapons. But this victory is temporary. They will learn from this encounter and adapt their forces accordingly, which means we need to warn the Council as quickly as possible. Dr. Vasquez received their transmission with obvious alarm, immediately dispatching a heavily armed escort to ensure their safe return to the research facility. When they finally arrived, Marcus and Zarathus found the station bustling with activity as intelligence analysts worked to process their discoveries. Your findings confirm our worst fears, Dr. Vasquez said after reviewing their complete report. We're facing an extragalactic invasion force with capabilities that rival our most advanced military technologies. What's the Council's response? Marcus asked. They're activating the emergency defense protocols. Every member world is being notified, and military forces are being mobilized for what may be the largest conflict our galaxy has ever seen. And what about us? Dr. Vasquez smiled grimly. The Council would like to offer you both permanent positions as special advisors to the Defense Committee. Your unique capabilities and experience with these invaders make you invaluable assets in the coming war. Marcus looked at Zarathus, seeing his own thoughts reflected in his partner's ancient eyes. They had both spent years running from their pasts, avoiding the complications that came with being part of something larger than themselves. But sometimes running was an option. What do you think? Marcus asked his friend. I think, Zarathus replied, that we have found something worth fighting for. 6 months later, Marcus Chun and Zarathus stood on the bridge of the GCS Harmony, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for the final assault on the invaders' staging area. Around them, representatives from dozens of species worked together to coordinate humanity's last desperate stand against extinction. The war had been brutal and costly, with entire star systems lost to the alien harvesting operations. But it had also forged unprecedented alliances between former enemies. Imperial dragons fought alongside Council forces, while human ingenuity had provided crucial advantages in adapting captured alien technology. Are you ready for this? Marcus asked as the fleet began its approach to the alien stronghold. I have been ready my entire life, Zarathus replied. But for the first time, I fight not because I was ordered to, but because I choose to. The battle that followed would be remembered as the turning point in a galactic liberation war. The combined forces of a dozen civilizations, unified by necessity and guided by the unlikely partnership between a human mechanic and a deserter dragon, finally drove the invaders from their galaxy. In the aftermath of victory, as the reconstruction efforts began, Marcus and Zarathus found themselves with choices they had never expected to have. The Council offered them positions of honor and authority. The Zephyrian Empire extended pardons and commendations. Corporations lined up to hire them for lucrative consulting contracts. But in the end, they chose to return what they knew best. The rusty wrench, now significantly upgraded with the best technology the galaxy could provide, once again found itself traveling the outer rim. Not as fugitives this time, but as partners in the most successful repair and salvage operation in known space. Any regrets? Marcus asked one evening as they shared a meal prepared with Zarathus's characteristic skill. Only one, Zarathus replied, that it took a century of existence for me to discover what truly mattered, which is family, purpose. The knowledge that someone cares whether you live or die, and that you care about them in return. Marcus raised his cup in a toast. To family, then. To family, Zarathus agreed. And to the truth that sometimes the best partnerships begin with the simple words, I can cook. Outside their ship, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, carrying the light of hope to worlds that had been touched by darkness, but not consumed by it. And somewhere among those stars, a human mechanic and a dragon who had learned to choose his own path continued their journey together, fixing broken things and proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply refusing to give up on each other. In a cosmos where survival often depends on strength and cunning, they had discovered that the strongest foundation for any partnership is trust, respect, and the willingness to share a good meal at the end of a long day.